G'day, it's your old mate Matthew here on the Yarnsman podcast. In this episode, we have Tim Reid. We do touch on suicide and depression, so if you find that triggering, please step out or check out the help resources on our website. This episode was interesting to me because Tim is a fellow social entrepreneur with Helmet and kind of get to detail his story behind that and the kind of value or the hope and light he got from nature, being a hunter-gatherer and sharing good food. Hope you enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to the Yarnsman podcast. Today we have Tim Reid, who is a father, husband, you're a chef and a reality TV show star, as well as a business owner.
Yeah, I am. There's a few things happening there, but yeah, that is me.
Cool. And how are you getting on today?
Yeah, good day. Honestly, life at the moment feels pretty big. But overall, I'm happy. But it's not to negate the bigness that is life at the moment.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, we'll jump into the questions then, mate. What have you struggled with in the last week?
So you introduced me as a father, and that's actually quite a new thing. So our little girl, my wife and I's little girl, is 8 weeks old, and so very fresh. And my reflection on it is that my wife's huge personal growth and development started the moment our little girl Vera was born. And there's just this massive journey of being a woman that you go through to being a mother. And I had some moments and things like that, but in reality, as a guy, you're often surplus to requirements, and it felt like my role was just to support my wife through that journey. But the rubber hit the road for me in terms of growth and personal development when I went back to work. And you pointed to the fact I'm a business owner, tech entrepreneur. We're going through some fundraising stuff at the moment, having some pretty big conversations and meetings. And the real struggle for me at the moment, honestly, is doing those two parts of who I am well. Where so often it feels like one is negatively impacting the other. And that's just only 8 weeks in, right? That's the big struggle for me right now, and going through this growth and development that needs to happen in me as an individual. But it's bloody hard. Yeah.
What do you want to work on in the next week?
I think part of my answer to that struggle is trying to be a little bit more present wherever I am. It's difficult to try and be a good father whilst at work. Not that I like to think of separating identities and leaving one at home and one at work, but just to kind of be where I am. We used to use this term in chefing called watch your hands. And it literally just keep your eyes on your hands. Don't worry about anything around. If your eyes are on your hands, you make less mistakes. And that's probably something I need to get a bit better at and want to get better at in the next week.
I feel like that's a constant struggle for entrepreneurs, or when you're chasing kind of social change movements, being present in all the parts of your life as an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, so true. It's tough, man. Who knows? And let's be honest, I probably won't be very good at it, but let's give it a nudge.
Yeah, that's true. What are you proud of?
Probably two core relationships in my life at the moment. One is my marriage. I'm super proud of my wife, who she is, that I chose her and committed her to being my wife. Obviously super grateful she chose that in return as well. But just super proud of where we're at, despite all life's challenges. And then the other one I'm really proud of is the intentional work that's gone into my co-founder relationship. Given that those are the two big things in my life right now, there's two people who are massive rocks in my life, that helped me with those big challenges, and that's kind of been, no, not even kind of, that's been really intentional about like building and developing that. So super proud of that at the moment. Yeah, reaping the rewards of it.
Love it. It's all about
Yeah,
having good relationships really helps.
yeah,
What
totally.
what gives you hope?
I think my reflection has been that when you really kind of identify your purpose and what you feel like you should be doing in life, right? And again, there's been a whole lot of intentionality around what should I be doing with my life. And I feel like I've found my purpose and I'm living it out. So often in that process of living out your purpose, I've found you come to moments in life where it's like, ha, I've been here before. Um, and it may not be the exact same thing, but it's a challenge that feels very similar to one you faced before, and it comes with experience, yes. But I truly believe it's when you align yourself to your purpose that you often find yourself in that position, and there's huge amount of hope in that because it means in my mind that I'm living out my purpose. But also, like, no matter what I face, because it feels like I've been here before, there's hope and there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I've done it before, therefore it can be done again, even though the challenge may present itself slightly differently. Yeah, I that gives me a lot of hope at the moment.
Cool. I like it.
Yeah,
Well, diving into the second half, the more meatier conversation style.
yeah, sure.
What's what's the yarn you'd like to share today? I know you've got many yarns, so yeah, what would you like to share with us?
Yeah. What is the yarn I'd like to share? Because as you say, things chop and change. Um, but I think if I was to share a yarn with guys, right? A group of guys who are trying to be intentional about opening up to one another. Um, it, the yarn I want to share is around my first experience of cooking. Um, so I was studying physiotherapy and had moved from small town New Zealand, Levin, just north of Wellington, moved up to Auckland to study physiotherapy. And there was a huge amount of personal value that was associated with success. That's how I kind of learnt how to value myself through high school. Was if I was successful, I was valued and therefore loved. And the transition from high school to university and the real world, I guess, is that so often it's difficult to come across success, and especially in the sense that you've been used to it at high school. And so without that, I felt very like removed of value, and therefore unloved. And I fell into a deep depression, to the point where I tried to take my own life. And just before that, I started seeing a therapist, and honestly, she was great, despite the journey that was, and it led me to this point of trying to take my own life. Um, Irrespective of that, she was wonderful, and she was big on, Tim, it's your responsibility to your mental health to put yourself in positions of light and positions of hope. Um, and I really liked the intentionality behind that. You'll probably hear that word quite a bit coming from my mouth, given that I've probably used it about 4 or 5 times already. But um, yeah, I really liked it. And my parents pulled me out of university after that crazy evening, and they took me down to Wellington where they live, and I just lived there for a month, resting and recovering. And towards the end of the month I lived with my parents, I shot my first deer. And for me, hope and light, I began to realize, kind of leading up to that time, was I found that either up in the hills hunting, for some reason it felt like my problems were on the flats, and I was up in the hills and above my problems, and it felt like I could breathe deeply again. And think logically, and there's probably a lot of physiological and psychological things that were happening like simultaneously to that, right? Like I was exercising, fresh air, spending time with people, all that kind of stuff. But for me, not being able to cognitively think of all of that, I was just like, hunting feels great. And the other way was spearfishing. Ironically, it felt like when I took a deep breath and dived under the waves, my problems were still on top of the waves. And as I was getting pushed around by the ocean and coming across fish and all that kind of stuff, it felt like I could breathe, even though obviously I couldn't. And there was just this lightness and hope to my life when that happened. So when I went hunting down in Wellington, I shot my first deer. Physiotherapist in training, right? Human anatomy, deer anatomy, not too dissimilar. So I butchered the deer myself, hacked my way through it, and then drove the meat up from Wellington to my best mate's house in Auckland. And we cooked a dinner. It's from Al Brown's Stoked book, Venison Ossobuco with buttered swede. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was meant to take us 3 hours. I think it took us 12. We bought a bottle of red wine we couldn't afford because we were poor students. But we cooked this dinner, and we had 10 of our mates from uni over for dinner, and we shared with them what I had shot. And it was this incredible moment, and it sounds stupidly Disney, but it was this incredible moment at the dinner table looking around. There had been a murmur of chatter and catching up and hanging out and talking crap, but it just fell dead silent. And everyone was kind of tucking into their food. And I had this euphoric moment where in the past, when I'd been hunting and spearfishing, like I'd seen the hope and the light. And then I returned back to the real world, and the hopelessness would creep back in, or the darkness would creep back in. But in this moment, I realized that the light had extended through that entire journey. That in the creation of memories with others, spending time with loved ones, and then there sitting at the dinner table with those who mattered most to me, it's a huge oversimplification, but it honestly felt like I'd found the thing that could help pull me out of my distress. And that the hope and the light was extended in the context of my community. That if I could just rinse and repeat this process, but the key part being that I would then cook it and spend time with those who mattered most to me in the world, taking something that I had got hope and light from collecting or catching or shooting. It felt like that would extend the hope. And that was a real turning point in value for me, because the value didn't come from perceived success, because it took me 4 times as long to cook this bloody dinner than it should have. And like I drained the bank account on the bottle of wine, and like I hacked my way through the animal, and it wasn't the perfect butchering and all this kind of stuff, right? But it was if I can spend time kind of feeding this hunter-gatherer in me, and then the person who enjoys to give and spend time with his loved ones, and probably in a selfish sense feel valued because of what I'm giving them. There was a real power in that for my mental health and well-being. And honestly, from that point forward, who I am and what I've become has extended from creating those special moments with other people and trying to craft them into more and more special occasions.
I love it. I mean, social health for me is, one of our kind of main objectives is creating those opportunities to bring people together. And when you talk about, either going spearfishing or hunting, that's spending time with people. You might be by yourself, but you're spending time with nature, and then equally sharing the food. That's all. These are all opportunities to do that. When we rewind back to going hunting and for your first time and shooting your first deer, who got you into that? How did that come about?
Yeah, it's a good question because like growing up in Levin, um, like I remember possum shooting and rabbit shooting and all that kind of stuff from like a really young age on mates' farms. So I didn't grow up on a farm, but like my aunties and uncles and everyone had farms. Then my friends had farms, and so there was a lot of that kind of hunting in my history. But I was also a pretty competitive cricket player, and very much into sports. So probably didn't like invest the time in it that I thought that I think it probably required to really catch the bug. Um, but there's a guy called Craig, and the deer I shot was off the back of his farm. And he's someone I really admired. There was probably a time around there where I really began to identify who in my life are kind of my heroes, for reasons other than just being hugely successful, right? And this guy Craig, like owned two of the three supermarkets in Levin, but his story was he sold them because he didn't feel like he was being the father he felt he should be, or the family man that he felt he should be. So he sold them and bought a farm. He'd never been farming before, but he bought a farm because he felt like that was the environment that would allow him to be the family man he wanted to be. And so he did. He just started a bull beef farm, and he kind of threw himself into it and learned how to do it, and then bought a hunting block off the back of it. It was awesome, and he was just this legend that I really admired. And so I think it was probably my parents who were like, "Hey, let's get you up there." Um, knowing I was struggling with my mental health and well-being, let's give this a go. Spearfishing at that point was really deep in my blood, and this was just another opportunity to do something outdoors. And um, yeah, I guess catch and kill, right? As crude as that sounds, it's something I enjoyed.
Yeah, they're both quite sort of primal. You touched on the
Yeah,
being at nature, being able to breathe and think logically, but there is something about just stripping it back to basics of being that hunter gatherer.
totally. Yeah, yeah, and it's I think a lot of it, if you do it well, is more cognitive than you think as well, right? Like there's cause and effect going on the whole time. How do I sneak in on this, or where's the wind going? And so it's not all just like silent meditation, pulling a trigger and seeing a bloodbath. There's the physical, the mental, the emotional challenge of it all. Yeah, I think it's wonderful.
And you touched on, sort of continuing to try and make these moments, and that's what
Mm,
led you into down the chefing path. How are you
yeah.
today with, trying to make these moments and continuing that with all the things you have going on in your life?
Yeah, yeah, really interesting. So, there's been another shift in my mental model since then. Um, so the shift that I talked about was this like value in success, and then becoming value in spending time in one of these things that fill my cups. Um, but what I found was I slowly turned into someone who almost had these split personas, right? And so when I was hunting and fishing, it was the hunter-gatherer, and I was spending time with as the hunter-gatherer. And then I'd turn up to work and I'd be the worker. And then I'd turn up to, my parents' place and I'd be the son. And I found myself not actually being ultra consistent with who I was. And if I spent too much time in one avenue, let's say hunting, fishing, um, I would almost negate and forget about the other roles I played in society, which friend, son, boyfriend, now husband, right? All of these things, and I'd forget about them, and I picture it as much like standing, having all these spinning plates, and I'd stand there in front of one pole with a spinning plate on it, and I'd keep spinning, 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 and that was balancing fine and spinning well, but you'd all of a sudden get your other plates wobbling and the pole's starting to fall over and things like that. So you'd have to run over there and spin that one and spin that one. And actually, you'd talk about me doing some chefing. So I won MasterChef, then went and worked in some of the best restaurants in the world over in Scandinavia. And I actually burnt out. Like quite literally, my body faked a stroke. I spent 6 months on couch bound because of inner ear problems as a result of that. And my reflection was I was spending so much time as a chef and negating and feeling the pressure of not being the other things, or not having the ability or time or energy to spin the other plates, that it crushed me when they started to fall down. I miss a mate's wedding, or I miss a date night, or wouldn't call home for 3-4 weeks. And thinking about that whilst at work would just absolutely crush me. And I feel like that was the kind of, despite the horrific hours and big pressure and all that kind of stuff, that was actually the thing that crushed me, and led to my burnout. So I went through this big change in mental model, and understanding that at all times I'm all of my personas. And, back then my desire was to be the world's best chef. But to think about the world's best chef just in the context of cooking actually makes no sense whatsoever, because that negates the fact that as the world's best chef, you're also a husband, also a son, also someone who likes to exercise, also someone who obviously likes to go hunting and fishing and all this other stuff. So if I was a 10 out of 10 chef, let's give it a rating, right? A 10 out of 10 chef, does that mean I spend 23 out of my 24 hours a day cooking? Or does it mean I spend 14 hours a day cooking, 2 hours with my wife, and start to break it down? And is that being a world-class chef? And that was a really challenging mental model to then go, well, now in my new context as an entrepreneur and in mental health, especially probably closely scrutinized because of we're a mental health company. And how do you balance? I hate that word balance, by the way. I believe it just comes down to juggling. There's no way I could keep all those plates spinning at once if I thought about them as individual things. But if I see myself as a single human being who carries multiple personas all at once, who lives life on a spectrum that is mental health and well-being, rather than a place that has destinations or points of balance, then my focus becomes about aiming in a direction, which is hopefully up, and it relieves all that pressure of keeping all those plates spinning, and just means each day is a new day, where hopefully I can do something better, where I can learn, where I can continue to aim up, and look to improve my well-being depending on what I need as an entire entity, not as what of these individual personas may need at any one time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I'm going to follow that up with a question. So there seems to be
Please.
a thing, spinning the plates, and I'm not going to say balancing the plates, but handling all the plates is really about integration. So when if you've gone through a bit of a mental health challenge and then coming back into, or you're on your journey, coming back into trying to just be operating a normal life, then you need to be mindful of all those things and kind of look how to integrate those into practice, as my waffling there. So really, if you're bringing in a new tool, whether it's hunting or fishing or hosting a dinner party and everything, you need to be mindful of how that all kind of works with the other parts of your life.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because there's only 24 hours in a day, right?
Last question to finish with: what advice would you have for people who are, going through a low moment or a challenge, and what they could do to find their place, to find headspace, or, be at one with whatever they want to be at one with?
It's a great question. First of all, I think the message we all need to share and send is there is hope, right? This point about mental health being a spectrum, I think, is super powerful to understand and comprehend, that there is no destination point. So just as you will never reach a point of mental health or physical health or fitness, you will never be max tick the box fitness. There's always an end you can continue to push to, but it's exactly the same at the bottom end, right? You will never be without mental health because it's an open-ended spectrum. Um, and my purpose for saying that is that there's always hope. Um, that there's the opportunity to just face in the right direction, to hold on. And I think what you guys do at the Yarnsman is super powerful, in that so often when we're going through a journey and a struggle, we as individuals don't have the capacity, the strength, the mental fortitude, the decision-making abilities, all this kind of stuff physiologically declines, right? Um, it's not just like a wives' tale. It physiologically happens, and so the power then comes from the people around you, where you have a group of caring people who are able to love and care and support you, and the hope is that they know you well. My parents were the ones who suggested go hunting, right? And they knew me well enough to help make that happen, to know that's probably something. They didn't know it would change my life, but they knew it was probably something that would give me some joy. Um, and so surround yourself with the right people, and they will help facilitate that. Understand that you're going to have lowered ability, um, lowered capacity, all of that stuff, but treat it as your purpose and your mission. Like my therapist said to me, Tim, it's your responsibility to make that happen. And it feels somewhat selfish at times, but it's like, okay, let's figure it out. What feels good? And the first week, just FYI, the first week I tried that, I'm pretty sure I bought myself a cheeseburger, and that was just my moment of like joy. And I'm pretty sure the second week I bought myself a t-shirt, and it was like, that's just valuing myself. I see a t-shirt that I want, I need a new t-shirt, I bought it. So often we deny ourselves those little things. But I was like, no, as a form of valuing myself, I'm just gonna do it. And those were the small steps I started to take. And so it's not like I fell upon hunting and spearfishing straight away, but I just tried all these things until I had this like Disney euphoric moment. And not everyone will have that Disney euphoric moment, but I think you'll get the sense of, hey, oh my gosh, this has filled my cup today. And then your responsibility is to rinse and repeat.
I said last question, but really the thing that it'd be quite good to hear about what's Helmet and what's happening there. You share that with us, because that's an important part. There's a tool to help.
Yeah, thank you. Helmet has come from my lived experience through mental health distress. It feels like I've had my fair share of mental health distress. But the realization kind of that I've almost just shared, that the people in distress, low capacity, low capability, low decision-making ability, low appetite for risk, all these kind of things. And yet society often kind of attacks with solutions the individual in distress, and only adds to the complexity of the situation when you go, well, what should I be doing? What the hell do I do now? Whereas the insight I had was actually the people desperately looking to help me solve this problem with my loved ones around me. And even still to this day, right? Like I still have massive anxiety days. And in those days, it's my wife's the most desperate to help me out of my funk, even more so than me. But she often has no idea what to do. And this is with my ability to communicate, I think, about my mental health quite well. And so Helmet is built on, well, what if we could find a way to empower that individual with the skills, with the knowledge, the tools that they need to make the difference they desperately want to see in that individual, and carry some of that weight because of the capability that they have to do so. And so we've been working on developing a bit of a model that looks to understand from some simple questionnaires what is needed at a certain time for that supporter to provide care to their loved one, and then what can we give them in once we know what they need, what do we give them? It's not about trying to turn people into therapists. It's about understanding that your role may be a parent, it may be a friend, a partner, whatever it might be. And what does it look like to be a good partner to someone in distress? What are the tools you need for your specific situation, be it anxiety, depression, eating disorders, you name it. What are the tools you need in that moment to better support your loved one? And we believe, well, it's super unique in the fact that we aim to work with the supporters, knowing that the supporters are desperately trying to help their loved ones. And so if we can build a community and a social network of supporters around an individual in distress, then whether that person goes on to seek clinical help or not, outcomes will always be better. And so we've been, as I say, testing this model in a small way. Our app gets applied to the App Store this week, which is super exciting. And then it's going to be available New Zealand wide to start with, just while we finish up some testing. But then the aim is to go global and build, we're calling them social support networks. So rather than a social network where you connect to thousands of people, let's connect you to your 5 great friends, or loved ones or partners, and be able to talk openly and honestly and help one another through the tough times, and know what to do when you need it the most.
Mate, I love this. This is we constantly get the question of what can I do to support and all those sort of things. And I think this is a really powerful tool. I'm a massive believer in reaching in. So if you notice a change in someone, you reach in and have a conversation. This is on that basis, and absolutely love it. And can't wait to see, the progress and all the support, you're going to help with. So it's good on you, mate.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. And what you guys resonates deeply with me too, right? It's what it's all about. So value what you're doing, value the questions that you get people asking each other every month. And if there's any way I can help support the Yarnsman, Matt, or anyone else that's out there who you guys try and support yourselves, then please let me know. Big fan.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Thank you so much for the yarn today. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.